Emperor Merrick's clawed fists shook as he read the intercepted transmission detailing the humans' clandestine fleet of 800,000 supercarriers hidden deep in the Kuiper Belt, an arsenal rivaling the Bynarr Empire's own formidable armada. How long had the humans been constructing these ships right under his snout? The thought filled him with both terror and rage. "Those hairless apes have been preparing for war," Merrick snarled, slamming a fist onto the command console. The Bynarr leadership had long suspected humanity's rapid technological ascension posed a threat to their dominion over the galaxy, but even their worst fears paled in comparison to the reality of Earth's secret military buildup. The transmission from Bynarr intelligence was clear. They needed to strike now before the human fleet could mobilize. It was their only hope of maintaining an iron grip on the star systems they'd subjugated for generations. Merrick barked out orders to his generals. They would gather the bulk of the armada, tens of thousands of warships, and launch an all-out assault on the humans' Kuiper Belt staging ground. The supercarriers would be obliterated before they ever saw battle, the upstart humans put in their place. But light years away in the blackness of space, Admiral Joshua Bailey stood on the bridge of his flagship supercarrier, reading a transmission of his own. Earth intelligence had detected the amassing Bynarr fleet and learned of their plans. The secrecy of the Kuiper Belt base had been compromised. There was no time to waste. Bailey immediately assumed command of the 800,000 carriers, issuing orders to bring fusion drives and FTL engines online. If the Bynarrs wanted a fight, he would bring one to their doorstep. The Admiral would lead the fleet in an FTL micro-jump, closing the distance to the approaching enemy armada in an instant. They would catch the Bynarrs unaware, hitting them with a fierce barrage from the supercarrier's unrivaled weaponry and swarms of advanced fighter drones. Everything hung in the balance. This battle would decide the fate of not just humanity, but the galaxy itself. If Bailey and his fleet prevailed, it would mark the beginning of the end for the Bynarr's cruel empire. Trillions of souls on enslaved worlds would be freed, ushering in an era of human influence and enlightenment. But if they failed, Earth and all her colonies would burn. Merrick would make an example of them, grinding humanity under his heel like so many before. Bailey gripped the rail of the command deck until his knuckles whitened. Failure was not an option. The bridge of the flagship supercarrier bustled with activity as Admiral Bailey hunched over the central command console, his eyes scanning the latest intelligence report flickering across the screen. The blood drained from his face as the implications sank in. Emperor Merrick had played a devious hand, splitting his forces to launch a surprise attack on Earth, while the bulk of his armada bore down on the human fleet in the Kuiper Belt. Bailey smacked his fist on the console, the metal reverberating with the force of the blow. "That scaly bastard." He turned to his second-in-command, Vice Admiral Marcus Hawkins, who stood at attention nearby. "Hawkins, we have a situation. Merrick's sent a detachment under Admiral Zorgax to hit Earth while we're tied up out here. I need you to take 200,000 carriers and haul ass back home. Reinforce our defenses and intercept those Bynarr sons of bitches." Hawkins nodded grimly, the gravity of the task etched on his weathered face. "Aye, Admiral. We'll make sure Earth stands." Bailey clasped Hawkins's shoulder, a gesture of trust and camaraderie. "I know you will, Marcus. Give 'em hell." As Hawkins strode off to rally his detachment, Bailey turned back to the view screen, the endless expanse of space stretching before him. The odds were stacked against them, with Merrick's forces potentially outnumbering the human fleet several times over. But Bailey had an ace up his sleeve: the superior technology and firepower of his supercarriers, and the skill and grit of his crews. The plan remained unchanged. Bailey would lead the remaining 600,000 carriers in a precisely calculated FTL microjump, bringing them within spitting distance of the Bynarr armada. They'd catch the scaly bastards with their pants down, hammering them with everything they had before they could react. As the fleet prepared for the jump, Bailey opened a comm channel to address his crews. His voice rang out across the supercarriers, a rallying cry in the face of insurmountable odds. "This is Admiral Bailey. In a few moments, we will engage the enemy in the battle that will decide the fate of not just Earth, but the entire galaxy. The Binars seek to crush us, to extinguish the flame of human freedom and consign us to eternal slavery. But we will not let them. We will fight to our last breath, to our last ship, to ensure that humanity endures, not just for ourselves, but for the countless billions suffering under Binar oppression. Today, we are their sword and their shield. Today we make our stand. For Earth. A chorus of cheers erupted over the comm as Bailey closed the channel. He turned to his helmsman, his voice steady with perseverance. Initiate the micro-jump. The helmsman's fingers danced over the controls, and the supercarriers leaped forward, vanishing into the swirling vortex of FTL. The die was cast, and the future of the cosmos hung in the balance. The void of space erupted into chaos as Admiral Bailey's fleet materialized from their FTL jump. Thousands of supercarriers burst into existence, catching the Binar armada with their pants down. "All ships, open fire!" Bailey barked. A devastating salvo of graviton torpedoes, antimatter missiles, and particle beams lanced out from the human vessels. The Binar ships' shields flickered and failed under the onslaught. Explosions blossomed across their hulls as armor buckled and internal systems overloaded. On the bridge of the Binar flagship, Emperor Merrick stumbled as his vessel rocked from multiple impacts. "What in the seven hells is happening?" he roared. "Human fleet, sir," a panicked officer reported. "They've caught us completely by surprise." Merrick snarled in frustration. How had the humans managed to close the distance so quickly? His carefully laid plans were unraveling before his eyes. Back on Bailey's command ship, the Admiral allowed himself a grim smile as he watched the carnage unfold on his tactical displays. Binar vessels were being torn apart left and right, their formations in disarray. "Deploy the drones," Bailey ordered. "Let's press our advantage while we have it." Tens of thousands of sleek, AI-controlled fighters poured from the hangars of the human supercarriers. They swarmed towards the Binar fleet, weaving and dodging through a hail of defensive fire with inhuman precision. The drones' nanotech armor shrugged off glancing blows as they closed in on their targets. Surgical strikes from their advanced weaponry punched through weakened shields, severing power conduits and rupturing fuel lines. Binar ships began to drift, crippled and powerless. But the Binars weren't beaten yet. Fresh waves of reinforcements poured into the battle, their superior numbers beginning to tell. Human ships found themselves boxed in, pummeled from multiple angles. "Admiral, we're taking heavy losses in sectors 3 and 7, Bailey's XO reported. "The Binars are starting to overwhelm us." Bailey's expression resolute. It was time. "Bring in the Prometheus." A colossal vessel, dwarfing even the massive supercarriers, surged into the fray. The Prometheus bristled with weapons, its hull gleaming with energy fields far beyond anything seen before. "This is Prometheus Actual," a synthesized voice echoed across the fleet channels. "All human vessels transmitting tactical data now. Prepare to coordinate fire on designated targets." The AI's incredible processing power allowed it to analyze the entire battlefield in microseconds, identifying weak points and orchestrating the human fleet's efforts with terrifying efficiency. Prometheus brought its main guns to bear, immense graviton cannons that warped the very fabric of space-time. They fired, and Binar dreadnoughts simply ceased to exist, crushed into singularities. In the Sol system, Vice Admiral Hawkins's reinforcements dropped out of FTL just as Admiral Zorgax's Binar strike force entered weapons range of Earth. "All ships, defensive formation Delta," Hawkins bellowed. "We hold the line here at any expense." The two fleets collided in a titanic exchange of fire. Human and Binar ships alike were reduced to expanding clouds of debris. The skies above Earth lit up with the fury of their duel. Hawkins gritted his teeth as damage reports flooded in. They were holding, but barely. Then a priority message flashed across his screen. "Binar infiltrators detected planetside. Multiple critical installations under attack." Hawkins swore viciously. He had no choice. He'd have to weaken his orbital defense to deal with the groundside threat. It was a grim calculus, but losing those facilities could doom them all. "Bravo, Squadron. Break off and make atmospheric insertion, he ordered. Coordinate with planetary defense forces to neutralize those infiltrators. Back in the Kuiper Belt, despite the Prometheus' fearsome power, the battle hung in the balance. For every Binar ship they destroyed, 2 more seemed to take its place. Admiral Bailey stared at the tactical hologram, his mind racing. They couldn't keep this up forever. He needed a plan, something audacious enough to break the stalemate decisively. His eyes fell on the Prometheus, that marvel of human engineering and artificial intelligence. A desperate idea began to form. Bailey opened a secure channel to the AI. Prometheus, I need options. How do we end this, here and now? There was a momentary pause as the vast intelligence considered the problem. I have a strategy, Admiral, it replied. But the risks are extreme. Bailey's face hardened. Tell me. Prometheus, execute Operation Decapitation, Bailey ordered, his voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. The AI's synthesized voice responded immediately. Acknowledged, Admiral. Initiating stealth protocols and plotting infiltration course. The massive vessel shimmered and vanished from sight, its advanced cloaking technology rendering it invisible to both visual and sensor detection. As the Prometheus slipped silently through the chaos of battle, Bailey turned his attention back to the main fleet. All ships, press the attack. Keep those Binar bastards busy. Human supercarriers unleashed a relentless barrage of fire, their graviton torpedoes and particle beams tearing through Binar ships. Swarms of drone fighters danced through the void, their inhuman reflexes allowing them to evade enemy fire while delivering precision strikes. But for every Binar ship destroyed, 2 more seemed to take its place. The enemy's numerical advantage was staggering, and Bailey knew they couldn't keep this up forever. Everything hinged on the Prometheus's mission now. Meanwhile, in Earth orbit, Vice Admiral Hawkins watched in dismay as another of his ships erupted into a fireball under sustained Binar fire. Sir, we've lost the Intrepid, his tactical officer reported grimly. Sectors 3 and 7 are crumbling. Hawkins clenched his fists. Damn it. We need more ships up here. Reroute Bravo and Charlie squadrons from planetary defense. But sir, that will leave Earth's surface exposed. I know the risks, Lieutenant, but if we lose orbital control, none of that will matter. Make it happen. As Hawkins's reinforcements surged up from the atmosphere, Binar dropships slipped past the weakened planetary defenses. Elite Binar commandos deployed across Earth's surface, their scaled forms moving with deadly purpose towards critical human installations. At the Houston spaceport, alarms blared as security forces scrambled to repel the alien infiltrators. Plasma bolts sizzled through the air as humans and Binars exchanged fire. The commandos moved with ruthless efficiency, planting demolition charges on vital equipment. Similar scenes played out at shipyards and weapons facilities across the globe. Human defenders fought valiantly, but they were outmatched by the Binar elite's advanced weaponry and tactical prowess. Back in the Kuiper Belt, the Prometheus finally reached its target. The Binar flagship Devastator loomed before it, a colossal construct of metal and energy fields. Graviton cannons charged, the Prometheus AI announced, commencing attack run. Blindsided by the sudden appearance of the cloaked vessel, the Devastator's shields buckled under the Prometheus's overwhelming firepower. As alarms blared throughout the Binar ship, the Prometheus unleashed its next surprise, a swarm of highly advanced combat drones. The drones poured through the breach in the Devastator's hull, their humanoid forms dripping with weaponry. They carved a path of destruction through the ship's interior, Binar defenders falling before their relentless advance. In his command center, Emperor Marek snarled in frustration as reports of the intruders flooded in. Send in the Royal Guard. I'll deal with these pests myself. The drones soon found themselves locked in furious combat with Marek's elite protectors. Energy weapons and monofilament blades clashed in the confined corridors of the flagship. Suddenly, the air itself seemed to warp and distort. Marek strode into view, his eyes glowing with psionic energy. With a gesture, he sent several drones flying backwards, their metal bodies crumpling under the force of his mental assault. But the AI controlling the drones adapted quickly. They activated psionic dampening fields, nullifying Marek's greatest advantage. Caught off guard, the Binar Emperor found himself surrounded, the drones closing in with implacable purpose. In a desperate last stand, Marek lashed out with fang and claw, his superhuman strength allowing him to crush drone limbs with his bare hands. But for every drone he destroyed, 2 more took its place. Finally, overwhelmed by sheer numbers, Marek felt his consciousness slip away as a neural disruptor struck home. The last thing he saw before blackness claimed him was his own reflection in the impassive faceplate of a human combat drone. The Prometheus's combat drones dragged Emperor Marek's unconscious form onto the bridge. Admiral Bailey stood tall, his eyes fixed on the tactical hologram as it flickered with updates from across the battlefield. "Sir, we have the Binar Emperor," his XO reported. Bailey nodded, his voice carrying an edge of steel. "Excellent. Now we press our advantage. All ships, this is Admiral Bailey. Commence Operation Hammer Strike. I repeat, commence Operation Hammer Strike." The space around them erupted in a fury of energy as the human supercarriers unleashed their full arsenal. Graviton torpedoes streaked across the void, warping spacetime itself as they slammed into Binar vessels. Particle beams lanced out, carving through hulls without difficulty. On the bridges of Binar ships, panic spread like wildfire. "The Emperor's been taken. Who's in command now? We need orders." Confusion reigned as competing Binar commanders tried to assert control. Some ships maintained their positions, while others broke formation entirely. A Binar cruiser, its captain seized by paranoia, opened fire on its own allies. "Sir, the Binars are in disarray," Bailey's tactical officer reported, a note of disbelief in his voice. They're firing on each other." Bailey allowed himself a grim smile. "Looks like the Binar chain of command isn't as robust as they thought. Press the attack. Show no mercy." Human fighters swarmed through the gaps in the Binar formation, their energy weapons carving apart the alien vessels with surgical precision. Explosions blossomed in the vacuum as ship after ship succumbed to the onslaught. Meanwhile, in the Sol system, Vice Admiral Hawkins surveyed the tactical readouts on his command ship. The sudden shift in the Binar fleet's cohesion hadn't gone unnoticed. "Status report," he barked. His XO responded quickly. "Sir, we're detecting massive disruptions in Binar communications. Their fleet formation is breaking down." Hawkins's eyes narrowed. This was their chance. "Redirect all available ships to focus fire on Zorgax's fleet. I want every gun we have hammering those bastards." The human fleet surged forward, their weapons blazing. Zorgax's ships, caught off guard by the sudden offensive, struggled to mount an effective defense. On Earth's surface, newly deployed ground units moved swiftly to engage the Binar infiltrators. In the ruins of Houston Spaceport, Marine Sergeant Rodriguez led his squad through debris-strewn corridors. "Contact front!" a private shouted as plasma bolts sizzled past. Rodriguez dropped to one knee, his rifle snapping up. He squeezed the trigger, and a Binar commando crumpled to the ground. "Push forward! We've got these scaly bastards on the run." Across the globe, similar scenes played out as human forces methodically rooted out and eliminated the alien saboteurs. Back on the Prometheus, Admiral Bailey stood before a comm panel. Emperor Marek slumped in restraints beside him. With a nod to his communications officer, Bailey began broadcasting across all Binar frequencies. "Attention, warriors of the Binar Empire. This is Admiral Bailey of the Human Alliance. Your emperor has been captured. Your fleets lie in ruins. Behold the futility of further resistance." The camera panned to show Marek, his scales dull and his once regal bearing broken. The Emperor's voice was barely above a whisper as he spoke. "My people, my warriors, stand down. The war is lost. Do not throw away your lives in vain." Across the battlefield, Binar ships began powering down their weapons, but pockets of resistance remained. Bailey turned to his AI interface. "Prometheus, initiate cyber warfare protocols. Hit their command networks with everything we've got." The AI's voice was cold and precise. "Acknowledged. Deploying viral payloads now." In an instant, Binar systems across hundreds of ships were overwhelmed. Navigation systems went haywire, weapons targeting computers crashed, and life support systems flickered ominously. With the enemy fleet crippled beyond recovery, Bailey gave his final order. All ships commence mop-up operations. Disable or destroy any vessel that refuses to surrender. The human supercarriers moved through the remnants of the once mighty Binar armada like wolves among sheep. Those ships that didn't power down were swiftly obliterated by precision strikes. In Sol, Zorgax's flagship rocked violently as graviton torpedoes ripped through its hull. On the bridge, consoles exploded in showers of sparks as the Binar admiral frantically tried to rally his forces. "We can still turn this around," Zorgax roared. "Stand and fight!" But his words fell on deaf ears. With their supply lines cut and reinforcements annihilated, Zorgax's subordinates had had enough. One by one, Binar ships began jumping to FTL, fleeing the slaughter. Zorgax stared in disbelief as his fleet disintegrated before his eyes. With a snarl of frustration, he gave the order he'd sworn he'd never utter. "All remaining ships, retreat! Abandon Earth orbit immediately!" As the battered Binar vessels limped away from Earth, leaving their ground forces to their fate, Admiral Bailey's fleet emerged from hyperspace. The two human fleets joined formation, their sensors already probing for new targets among the stars. Bailey opened a channel to Hawkins. "Excellent work, old friend, but our job's just the beginning. We need to strike while the iron's hot. Hit the Binar core worlds before they can regroup." Hawkins nodded grimly. "Agreed. My teams are already drawing up target lists. We'll make the bastards pay for every world they've enslaved." As the combined human armada prepared to push deeper into Binar space, Bailey addressed his fleet once more. "This is Admiral Bailey to all ships. Today, we've struck a blow for freedom that will echo across the galaxy. But the war isn't won yet. Stay sharp, stay focused, and together we'll bring the Binar Empire to its knees once and for all." The vast fleet of human warships stretched out before him, their engines flaring to life as they prepared to jump. The next phase of the war had begun, and humanity would not rest until victory was absolute. Admiral Bailey stood on the bridge of the Prometheus, his eyes fixed on the tactical display showing the Zorn Prime system. The planet's blue-green orb hung suspended in space, surrounded by the imposing silhouettes of human supercarriers. "All ships commence operation," Bailey ordered, his voice carrying the weight of command. "Secure orbital control and prepare for ground assault." The human fleet surged forward, their engines flaring bright against the void. Zorn Prime's meager defenses crumbled under the onslaught of graviton torpedoes and particle beams. Within hours, the skies above the Binar colony world belonged to humanity. On the planet's surface, Captain Sarah Chen led her platoon through the rubble-strewn streets of Zorn Prime's capital. The acrid smell of burning plastics and ozone filled the air as human dropships thundered overhead, deploying more troops and equipment. "Stay alert," Chen barked to her soldiers. "Intel says we've got Binar holdouts in this sector." No sooner had the words left her mouth than plasma bolts sizzled past, scorching the pavement at their feet. Chen dove for cover behind a collapsed wall, her rifle already up and tracking. "Contact front," she shouted, squeezing off a burst of fire. A Binar insurgent toppled from a nearby rooftop, its scaled body smoking. The firefight intensified as more Binars emerged from hidden positions, their weapons chattering. Chen's squad returned fire, the air thick with energy bolts and the staccato of railgun rounds. "Hammer 2-1, this is Chen," she called into her comm, "requesting drone support at my position." Seconds later, a swarm of combat drones swooped in, their weapons blazing. The tide of battle shifted as the AI-controlled units systematically targeted and eliminated the Binar resistance. As the last echoes of gunfire faded, Chen stood and surveyed the carnage. "Area secure," she reported. "Moving to next objective." Deeper in the city, Sergeant Jack Torres led his team of exoskeleton troopers through the lower levels of a Binar research facility. Their heavy footsteps echoed off sterile white walls as they pushed deeper into the complex. "I've got a bad feeling about this place," Torres muttered, his enhanced senses on high alert. They reached a sealed blast door, its surface marked with Binar warning glyphs. Torres nodded to his tech specialist, who quickly bypassed the security systems. As the door slid open, a wave of putrid air washed over them. The troopers recoiled at the sight that greeted them, row upon row of containment tanks, each holding a twisted, mutated form. "Jesus Christ," Torres breathed, his stomach churning. "What the hell were they doing down here?" Data terminals lining the walls flickered to life, revealing footage of Binar scientists conducting horrific experiments on alien subjects. Genetic manipulation, cybernetic implantation, biological weaponry. The scope of their atrocities was staggering. Torres keyed his comm, his voice tight with barely controlled rage. "Command, this is Sergeant Torres. You're going to want to see this." Back on the Prometheus, Admiral Bailey received the report from Zorn Prime with grim satisfaction. The conquest of the Binar colony was proceeding smoothly, but the revelations from the underground labs had steeled his tenacity. "Sir," his communications officer interrupted, "we're receiving transmissions from multiple systems across Binar space. It seems news of our victory has sparked widespread uprisings." Bailey nodded, a predatory gleam in his eyes. "Excellent. Prepare a covert ops team. It's time we added some fuel to those fires." Within days, human advisors and advanced weaponry were flowing to resistance groups throughout the former Binar Empire. Reports flooded in of successful strikes against Binar military installations, each one further weakening the alien regime's grip on power. On Binar Prime, the streets ran red with blood as the populace rose up against their oppressors. Zorgax's troops struggled to maintain control, their efforts hampered at every turn by human special forces teams operating in the shadows. Admiral Bailey watched the chaos unfold from orbit, knowing the time had come for the final blow. He gave the order, and the Prometheus, along with its escort fleet, engaged their FTL drives, vanishing in a flash of light. They reappeared in low orbit over Binar Prime, their stealth systems rendering them invisible to the planet's defenses. Bailey's voice was cold as he issued the command that would seal the Binar Empire's fate. "Target Zorgax's palace and military command. Fire at will." The Prometheus's main guns roared to life, lances of energy streaking down from the heavens. The seats of Binar power crumbled under the barrage, reduced to smoking craters in a matter of minutes. As the dust settled, human ground teams moved in, securing key locations and rounding up what remained of the Binar leadership. The once mighty empire had fallen, its chain of command severed. Admiral Bailey's eyes scanned the holographic display of Corvash, its surface a patchwork of industrial complexes and military installations. The planet's defenses bristled with energy signatures, a testament to General Crashor's preparations. "A frontal assault would cost us dearly," Bailey muttered, his fingers tracing the orbital defense grid. He turned to his tactical officer. "What's the status of our stealth insertion teams?" "Green across the board, sir," the officer replied. "Ghost Squad is prepped and ready for deployment." Bailey nodded. "Launch the operation. Tell them to focus on the primary fusion reactor. We need those defenses down." Hours later, on Corvash's surface, Lieutenant Sarah Chen led her team through the shadowy underbelly of a massive industrial complex. The air hummed with the barely perceptible thrum of heavy machinery. "Target's 200 meters ahead," Chen whispered into her comm. "Watch for patrols." As if on cue, the stomping of Binar feet echoed down the corridor. Chen raised a fist and her squad melted into the shadows. A group of alien soldiers marched past, oblivious to the human infiltrators mere feet away. Once clear, the team pressed on. They reached a heavily fortified blast door, its surface etched with Binar warning glyphs. "Sapper, you're up," Chen ordered. A soldier stepped forward, unslinging a pack of specialized equipment. His hands flew over the alien control panel, bypassing security measures with practiced ease. The door slid open with a soft hiss. Inside, the fusion reactor core pulsed with barely contained energy. Chen's team worked swiftly, planting charges at key points and disabling failsafes. "Charges set," the demolitions expert reported. "Ready to blow on your command." Chen nodded. "Fall back to extraction point. We'll detonate once we're clear." As the team retreated, alarms began to blare. They'd been discovered. Plasma bolts sizzled past as Binar security forces converged on their position. "Move!" Chen shouted, returning fire. Her rifle crackled, downing an alien warrior. The humans fought their way to the extraction point, a hail of weapons fire at their heels. As they piled into the stealth shuttle, Chen hit the detonator. Deep in the bowels of the facility, explosions rippled through the reactor complex. Safety systems failed in cascade, the fusion core's containment field fluctuating wildly. In orbit, Admiral Bailey watched the planet's energy grid flicker and die. "Now," he barked. "Hit them with everything we've got." The Prometheus's main gun flared to life, a lance of concentrated gravitational energy streaking towards the destabilized reactor. The resulting detonation shook the planet to its core, a massive EMP wave rolling across the surface. Binar defense systems went dark. Their ships, suddenly without power, drifted helplessly in orbit. Bailey's fleet surged forward, their weapons blazing. Corvash's orbital defenses crumbled under the onslaught. On the ground, human dropships punched through the atmosphere, disgorging platoons of marine shock troops and hulking exoskeleton units. They hit Crashor's forces hard, exploiting the chaos caused by the reactor's destruction. Sergeant Jack Torres led his exo-squad through the rubble-strewn streets of Corvash's capital. His armored suit's sensors picked up Binar life signs ahead. "Contact front," he called out. "Light 'em up!" The exosuit's heavy weaponry roared to life, cutting down scores of disorganized Binar troops. Torres's squad pushed forward relentlessly, securing block after block of the alien city. For weeks, the battle raged across Corvash's surface. Human forces methodically crushed pockets of resistance, their advance unstoppable. Finally, they converged on Crashor's command bunker. A final, furious firefight erupted as the Binar general's elite guard made their last stand. When the smoke cleared, Crashor was in chains, his once mighty forces utterly defeated. Admiral Bailey stood on the bridge of the Prometheus, reviewing reports from across former Binar space. One by one, the remaining warlords fell to precision strikes, an overwhelming force. His comm officer interrupted with urgent news. "Sir, we've just received intel on Admiral Zorgax. He's alive, and he's rallying forces in the Tartarus system." Bailey's eyes narrowed. "Zorgax," he growled. "I should have known that snake would slither away." He turned to his XO. "Prep a strike force. We're going hunting." As the Prometheus and its escort fleet prepared to jump to FTL, Bailey. The Prometheus tore through the fabric of space-time, emerging in the Tartarus system with a flash of light. Admiral Bailey's eyes locked onto the tactical display, scanning the vast shipyard complex sprawling before them. "Deploy stealth probes," he ordered. "I want eyes on every inch of that facility." Sleek, black drones slipped from the Prometheus's launch bays, their stealth fields rendering them invisible to Binar sensors. As data streamed back, Bailey's face hardened. "Sir," his tactical officer reported, "Zorgax has assembled a considerable force. We're detecting multiple capital ships and fighter squadrons, but their systems appear to be in various states of completion." Bailey nodded, his mind racing. "They're not ready. We have a chance to end this before it begins." He turned to his command staff. "Prepare for a surgical strike. We'll hit their production facilities hard and fast. The Prometheus will lead the charge, supported by our Supercarrier group." As the human fleet maneuvered into position, alarms blared across the Binar shipyard. Energy shields flickered to life, enveloping the sprawling complex. "They've spotted us!" Bailey's XO shouted. "Commence electronic warfare protocols," Bailey commanded. "Scramble their sensors, create openings for our fighters." The Prometheus's advanced systems pulsed, flooding Binar communication channels with noise and false data. On the tactical display, gaps appeared in the enemy's defensive screen. "Launch all squadrons," Bailey ordered. Swarms of human drones and missiles poured through the openings, evading frantic Binar point defense fire. Explosions blossomed across the shipyard's superstructure as the attacks found their marks. Bailey strapped himself into the cockpit of a heavily armored assault craft. "This is Admiral Bailey to all pilots. Form up on me. We're going in hot." The strike team rocketed towards the shipyard, weaving through debris and weapons fire. Binar fighters swarmed around them, plasma bolts sizzling past their hulls. "Fox 3!" a human pilot called out. A missile streaked from his craft, vaporizing an enemy fighter. Bailey's hands danced across his controls, jinking to avoid incoming fire. He watched as one of his pilots erupted in a ball of flame, struck by a lucky shot. "Push through!" he shouted. "We have to reach the central complex." The remaining human craft punched through the last line of Binar defenses. Bailey's targeting computer locked onto the massive construction gantries ahead. "Antimatter warhead armed," he reported. "Everyone clear the blast radius." Bailey's craft screamed towards the target, alarms blaring as Binar weapons fire intensified. At the last possible moment, he released the warhead and yanked his controls hard, narrowly avoiding a collision with the structure. The detonation was beyond anything Bailey had ever witnessed. A blinding flash seared his retinas even through the craft's protective screens. When his vision cleared, he saw entire sections of the shipyard simply gone. "My God," he breathed. The Prometheus and its escorts pressed their advantage, mopping up what remained of Zorgax's crippled fleet. A handful of Binar ships managed to slip away, but the bulk of the alien armada drifted in pieces. As the last pockets of resistance fell silent, Bailey directed his forces to scour the wreckage. They recovered fragments of alien technology and databanks full of intelligence, but it was deep in the ruins of a research lab that they made their most chilling discovery. "Sir," a Marine reported, his voice tight, "you need to see this." Bailey stared at the stasis tanks, each containing a twisted, half-human abomination. Nearby computer banks held schematics for a nightmarish bioweapon. "Zorgax," Bailey snarled, "you sick bastard." He turned to his command staff, his eyes blazing with cold fury. "This isn't over. Not until we hunt that monster down and make sure he can never threaten humanity again." The Prometheus's engines flared to life, carrying Bailey and his victorious fleet away from the broken shipyard. But the Admiral knew their greatest challenge still lay ahead. Admiral Bailey stood on the bridge of the Prometheus, his eyes fixed on the holographic display of the galaxy. Red markers dotted the vast expanse, each representing a potential hiding spot for the elusive Zorgax. "Initiate deep space scan, pattern Theta 9, Bailey ordered. The ship's advanced sensor arrays hummed to life, probing the depths of space for any trace of Binar technology. Days turned to weeks as the Prometheus methodically swept sector after sector. The crew worked tirelessly, analyzing reams of data and intercepted transmissions. Bailey paced the bridge, the weight of his responsibility evident in the dark circles under his eyes. Finally, a breakthrough. "Sir!" called out Lieutenant Chen, her fingers flying over her console. "We've detected a faint energy signature. It matches known Binar patterns." Bailey leaned in, studying the readout. "Location?" "Uncharted system, sir. Extreme outer rim. It's an ice world." A thin smile crossed Bailey's face. "That's our target. Prep the strike force for immediate deployment." The Prometheus and its escort of stealth ships sliced through the fabric of space-time, emerging in a system dominated by a bloated red giant. The ice world hung in the distance, a pale blue orb against the star's crimson glow. As they approached, Bailey watched the sensor readouts with growing intensity. "There," he pointed to a cluster of faint energy signatures. "Underground complex. That's where we'll find Zorgax." The strike force descended through the planet's turbulent atmosphere. Howling winds buffeted the dropships as they touched down on the frozen surface. Teams of Arctic warfare specialists fanned out, their white camouflage blending seamlessly with the endless fields of ice and snow. Captain Sarah Chen led her squad through a narrow ravine, the wind cutting through even their insulated armor. Suddenly, her motion tracker chirped a warning. "Contact!" she hissed into her comm. 3 o'clock, 100 meters. A plasma bolt sizzled past her head, melting a furrow in the ice wall behind her. Chen's team dove for cover as a Binar patrol opened fire from a concealed position. "Suppressing fire," Chen ordered. Her squad's weapons chattered, forcing the Binars to hunker down. "Rodriguez, flank left. Takeda, with me." They fought their way forward, methodically eliminating the Binar resistance. As the last alien fell, Chen surveyed the area. "Clear," she reported. "But they know we're here now." Similar skirmishes erupted across the frozen wasteland as human forces closed in on Zorgax's hidden base. Bailey coordinated the assault from orbit, watching as his troops converged on the concealed entrance. "All units in position," reported his tactical officer. "Awaiting your orders, sir." Bailey nodded. "Light it up." The Prometheus's main gun flared to life, a lance of concentrated energy streaking down from orbit. It struck the ice with devastating force, vaporizing tons of frozen rock and exposing the reinforced doors of Zorgax's underground lair. Human assault teams poured into the breach, engaging Zorgax's fanatical defenders in close-quarters combat. The air filled with the acrid smell of ozone as energy weapons discharged in the confined space. Deeper and deeper they pushed, fighting for every meter of ground. In a cavernous chamber, they made a chilling discovery. Rows upon rows of antimatter warheads lined the walls, each one capable of reducing a planet to atoms. "My God!" breathed Sergeant Torres, his exosuit sensors struggling to process the readings. "Sir, you need to see this." Bailey's voice crackled over the comm. "I see it, Sergeant. Find Zorgax. Now." Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the complex. A computerized voice echoed through the corridors. "Self-destruct sequence initiated. All personnel evacuate immediately." Bailey's voice cut through the chaos. "Strike Team Alpha. Get to that reactor core and shut it down. The rest of you, find Zorgax and take him alive if possible." Alpha Team fought their way through waves of Binar defenders, their path lit by strobing emergency lights. They reached the reactor control room only to find Zorgax himself waiting for them. The Binar Admiral's eyes glowed with psionic energy. With a gesture, he sent 2 human soldiers flying across the room. "You're too late," he snarled. "This ends now." A furious battle erupted. Zorgax's enhanced Binar troops engaged the humans in brutal close-quarters combat, while the Admiral himself unleashed devastating psionic attacks. Private First Class Emily Takeda ducked under a psionic blast, feeling the energy crackle past her helmet. She brought her rifle up, squeezing off a burst that dropped one of Zorgax's bodyguards. "Reactor's going critical!" shouted the team's tech specialist. "We need to shut it down now!" Takeda saw an opening. She charged forward, tackling Zorgax to the ground. They grappled furiously, the Binar's inhuman strength nearly overwhelming her. "Now!" she yelled. Her squadmate rushed to the control panel, fingers flying over the alien interface. With seconds to spare, the reactor core stabilized. Zorgax howled in fury as human soldiers subdued him, snapping restraints around his limbs. Bailey's voice came over the comm, tight with barely contained emotion. "Zorgax secure. Doomsday weapon neutralized. Well done, people. Let's get off this frozen rock." Rock. As the Prometheus accelerated away from the ice world, Admiral Bailey stood on the bridge, watching the frozen planet recede into the distance. The captured Binar warlord Zorgax sat in a heavily fortified containment cell deep within the ship's bowels. "Set course for Earth," Bailey ordered. "Maximum speed." The Prometheus's engines flared to life, propelling the massive vessel into FTL. As they traveled through the swirling vortex of faster-than-light space, Bailey paced the bridge. His eyes darted from readout to readout, constantly checking the status of their high-value prisoner. "Sir," Lieutenant Chen reported, "Zorgax's vitals are stable. Security teams report no unusual activity." Bailey nodded, but the knot in his stomach refused to loosen. Years of combat had honed his instincts, and right now, those instincts screamed danger. 3 days into their journey, alarms blared across the ship. Bailey's head snapped up from the report he'd been reading. "Report!" he barked. Before anyone could respond, the bridge doors exploded inward. Through the smoke strode a figure Bailey knew well, his own second-in-command, Commander Reeves. But Reeves's eyes glowed with an unnatural purple light, and his hands crackled with psionic energy. "For the glory of Binar!" Reeves shouted, unleashing a wave of psionic force that sent crewmen flying. Bailey dove behind a console as plasma bolts sizzled overhead. All around him, crew members he'd trusted with his life revealed themselves as Binar agents, turning their weapons on their former comrades. "This is Admiral Bailey," he shouted into his comm. "We have a code black. All loyal personnel repel boarders." The ship devolved into chaos. In the brig, security cameras showed Zorgax calmly stepping out of his cell, freed by turncoat guards. Bailey fought his way through the corridors, leading a ragtag group of loyal crew members. They encountered Reeves, or whatever the thing wearing Reeves's face truly was, outside engineering. The Binar agents' psionic assault tore through their ranks, sending men and women screaming to the deck. Bailey raised his sidearm, squeezing off 3 shots. The rounds sparked harmlessly off a psionic barrier surrounding Reeves. "You've lost, human," Reeves sneered. With a gesture, he hurled Bailey against a bulkhead. Pain exploded through Bailey's body. Through blurred vision, he saw Zorgax stride into view, flanked by more Binar agents. "I warned you, Admiral," Zorgax said, his voice dripping with contempt. "You can't cage a god." Alarms screamed as the ship's reactor core began to overload. Bailey struggled to his feet, but it was too late. Zorgax and his followers were already piling into shuttlecraft, preparing to abandon ship. "All hands, abandon ship," Bailey ordered, his voice hoarse. "Get to the escape pods." As Bailey helped the last of his loyal crew into a pod, Zorgax's laughter echoed through the comms. The Admiral watched helplessly as the Binar shuttles streaked away into the void of space. The Prometheus, pride of the human fleet, careened toward an unsuspecting colony world. Bailey's escape pod jettisoned mere moments before the mighty vessel detonated in a blinding flash of light. Adrift in space, Bailey and the survivors could only watch as Zorgax's forces vanished into the depths of space. The true scope of the disaster became clear in the days that followed. The Binar resistance, reinvigorated by Zorgax's return, launched a series of devastating raids across human space. In a secure bunker on Earth, Bailey stood before the assembled military leadership. The weight of failure pressed down on him, but he refused to be broken. "Gentlemen," he said, his voice steady, "we've been bloodied, but we are not beaten. We will root out every last Binar agent in our ranks. We will hunt Zorgax and his followers to the ends of the galaxy. And we will show these alien bastards the true meaning of human resilience." The officers nodded, a fire kindling in their eyes. Bailey turned to the star map dominating one wall of the room. Somewhere out there, Zorgax was gathering his strength. But this time, humanity would be ready. The hunt was on.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel. And for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.